You walk through the door after a terrible day. You say nothing. You don't cry. Maybe you even smile when someone asks if you're okay. But your dog follows you from room to room. It sits closer than usual. It watches your face. And when you finally sit down, it presses against you and stays there. People like to say animals can sense sadness. But what exactly are they sensing? Your face, your voice, your smell? Or do some animals actually understand that something is wrong inside another mind? Because those are very different things. Detecting distress is chemistry. Responding to it is behavior. Caring about it would be something else entirely. From across a living room, all three can look almost identical. So when your dog comes closer on the worst day of your week, what is actually happening? Scientists have spent years trying to separate those possibilities. And the first thing they discovered is that your body may tell your dog something is wrong long before you do. Stress changes your body before you explain it to anyone. Your breathing changes. Your heart rate changes. Even the chemical profile of your breath and sweat changes. Researchers collected samples from the same people before and after an acute stress task, then presented those samples to trained dogs. The dogs distinguished the stress samples from the baseline samples with a combined accuracy above 90%. No crying, no sad expression, no familiar owner standing in front of them, just scent. Other research suggests that human stress odor can even influence how dogs respond to uncertain situations. So there is good evidence that a dog can detect a change in a human's internal physical state without being told anything. But detecting a signal is not the same as understanding what it means. A smoke detector knows your kitchen is filling with smoke. It does not understand fire. So researchers needed a harder test. What happens when an animal sees a human in distress? Researchers have tested how dogs respond when humans cry, hum, or behave normally. Dogs showed more attention toward crying people and were more likely to approach and make contact with them than during control conditions. And the response was not limited to their owners. Dogs also approached unfamiliar people who were crying. That matters because years of living with one person can explain a lot. A dog may learn that slower movement, a changed smell, a softer voice, and less eye contact predict a certain situation. But a stranger removes much of that history. Something about the distress itself appears to matter. Researchers sometimes describe this as empathy-like behavior. But before we call it empathy, there's a simpler explanation to test. Maybe dogs are not understanding sadness at all. Or maybe they are reading patterns. Slower movement, different breathing, a changed smell, a different voice. That explanation requires no concept of sadness and no human-like compassion. And some experiments support caution. In one study involving unfamiliar humans, dogs were not significantly more likely to open a door for a crying stranger than for a humming stranger. So maybe empathy is not one ability. Imagine a staircase. First, detect that another individual's state has changed. Second, become affected by that change yourself. Third, approach the distressed individual. Fourth, understand what is causing the distress. Fifth, deliberately act to improve the other individual's situation. A dog could reach the first 3 steps without ever reaching the 5th. From across a living room, though, all 5 might look the same. A dog puts its head on your knee and stays there. And this leads to a stranger possibility. Maybe an animal can share part of your emotional state without understanding your sadness at all. Scientists use the term emotional contagion for a process in which one individual's emotional state influences another without requiring a sophisticated understanding of the cause. Humans experience versions of this too. A frightened crowd can make you tense before you know what everyone is afraid of. Laughter can spread before you hear the joke. Dogs have shown physiological and behavioral responses consistent with this kind of process when exposed to distress signals from humans and other dogs. So your dog may not need to think, "My human is sad because something terrible happened." Its nervous system may only need to register, "Something is wrong with this individual. And now my own state is changing too." That sounds less impressive than human compassion. But evolution does not care whether an ability sounds impressive. It cares whether it is useful. And for social animals, noticing distress can be very useful. For a social animal, another individual's distress contains information. A group member that suddenly freezes, cries out, or changes posture may be injured, sick, or reacting to a threat you have not noticed. Ignoring those signals can be dangerous. Dogs are not the only animals that respond this way. Researchers observing Asian elephants found that after distress events, other elephants increased physical contact, and vocal communication toward the distressed individual. Bystanders also showed behavioral changes consistent with emotional contagion. Scientists are careful about claiming what elephants subjectively feel, but consolation-like responses have appeared in multiple highly social species. That changes the scale of the question. Maybe responding to another creature's distress is not a strange trick, dogs. Learned by living in our houses. Maybe parts of this machinery are ancient, older than domestication, older than dogs. But there is one problem every experiment eventually runs into. We can measure behavior. We can measure heart rate. We can collect breath and sweat. We can observe whether an animal approaches, avoids, touches, waits, vocalizes, or changes its decisions. We can show that dogs distinguish human stress odor. We can show that some dogs behave differently toward human distress. What we cannot do is ask a dog what any of this feels like from the inside. The sentence, "I know you are sad, and I want you to feel better," contains an internal experience that behavior alone cannot prove. Humans make two opposite mistakes here. One is anthropomorphism, assuming an animal feels exactly what we feel because its behavior looks familiar. The other is assuming that because we cannot prove a human-like internal experience, nothing meaningful is happening at all. The evidence supports neither extreme. We know animals are receiving information. We know that information can change their behavior. In some cases, it may change their emotional state too. What we do not know is what that experience feels like to them. Maybe an animal does not need our concept of sadness at all. Your dog does not need to understand your job, your relationship, the argument you had, the phone call you received, or the thought you cannot get out of your head. It may know something more immediate. Your smell is different. Your breathing is different. Your movement is different. Your voice is different. Your normal pattern has changed. Something about the individual it knows no longer matches what it expects. And because social animals have survived partly by paying attention to one another, the change can matter. Not necessarily because your dog understands your story, not because it experiences sadness exactly as you do, but because it understands enough about you to recognize that the version of you standing in the room today is different from the version it expected. So, do animals know when you are sad? For dogs, we have good evidence that they can detect physiological changes associated with human stress. We have evidence that they respond differently to some forms of human emotional distress, and we have evidence suggesting that processes such as emotional contagion may allow one individual's emotional state to influence another. What we do not have is proof that a dog experiences your sadness the way another person does, understands its cause, or consciously decides to comfort you for the same reasons a human might. The honest answer sits somewhere between those extremes. Your dog may never know why you are crying. It may not understand the thoughts running through your head. It may not even possess anything identical to our concept of sadness, but it can know that something about you has changed. And sometimes, when that happens, it chooses to come closer. So the next time you're sitting silently in a room, trying to convince everyone that you are fine, the animal beside you may not know your reason. It may not understand your thoughts. But before you have explained anything at all, it may already know that you are not quite yourself, and it stayed. If questions like this are why you are here, subscribe. We are going much deeper into the animal mind from here. And tell me this, has an animal ever noticed that something was wrong with you before? Another person did?